I was married for 6 years, and during those years my husband and I shared many moments of love, care, and companionship. But no matter how much we tried to keep our life full and happy, there was always a kind of silence between us. And that silence was not because of anger, distance, or lack of communication. It was a silence that belonged to an empty cradle, a silence that reminded us every day of the child we longed for but never had. My husband loved me deeply, and he always showed patience and kindness. He held my hand when I felt weak. He tried to make me laugh when I was sad. And he never once blamed me for the emptiness we both felt. Yet even in the middle of his love I could feel the weight of what was missing. Our home was calm, but the calm often felt heavy, because it was filled with a quietness that no music, no laughter, and no conversation could truly cover. Every time we heard children in the neighborhood, whether they were laughing, playing, or running down the street, that silence inside our home seemed even louder. For me, the sound of children's laughter was like a sharp reminder of something I could never have. I would stand near the window and listen to them play, and while they screamed with joy and their parents called after them, I would feel a deep ache inside, as if my heart was breaking into pieces again and again. Sometimes I imagined what it would be like to have my own child among them, to hear a small voice calling me Mom, to feel tiny arms around my neck, to know that my home was not just a place of two adults trying to stay strong, but a place where new life grew and made everything brighter. But those were only dreams, and each time I was pulled back into reality, the emptiness inside me grew stronger. The day the doctors told me I could never be a mother was the day that emptiness was given words, and those words have never left me. The doctor spoke kindly but directly, explaining that no treatment would work for me, no medicine or surgery could change the truth, and when I heard it, it felt like the air left my body. I sat there listening, but I could hardly breathe, because in that moment all the hope I had carried for years was destroyed. It was as if a heavy door closed inside me forever. I walked out of that hospital with my husband holding my hand, but his hand, though warm and steady, could not heal the wound those words had created in my soul. I kept hearing the doctor's voice in my head, repeating that I would never be a mother, and each time the memory came back, it felt like knives cutting me again and again. For weeks after that, I moved through life like a shadow of myself. I woke up each morning and for a short second I would forget, but as soon as my mind remembered, the heaviness returned. Nights were even harder because when I lay down in the quiet, I imagined what it might have been like to hear the cry of a newborn in the darkness, to walk across the room half asleep and pick up a baby, to rock them gently until they drifted back to sleep. But instead of that dream, all I had was silence. My husband continued to show me love, but I often felt guilty because I thought I had failed him. I thought I had taken away his chance to be a father, and even though he never said such a thing, the guilt lived inside me. I thought about the cradle we once dreamed of buying, the toys we once thought about filling the room with, the bedtime stories we once imagined reading, and I knew that all of it would remain in our imagination only. That truth weighed on me every single day, and though life went on, the silence of that empty cradle never stopped following me. At first, when I got married and it became clear that I was having difficulty becoming a mother, my in-laws were supportive, or at least they acted as if they were supportive, because they told me not to worry and they said that things would be fine, and in the beginning their words gave me some comfort. But over time the tone of their behavior began to change, and the kindness I once believed in slowly turned into cruelty that hurt me in ways I never thought I would experience within a family. They started to whisper things behind my back, and even when they spoke softly I could hear the weight of their words because they called me cursed, they said I was unlucky, they said I was barren, And even though those words were not shouted, they felt louder than anything I had ever heard. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself that they did not mean it, that maybe they were frustrated or did not understand the pain I was already carrying. But as time went on, their whispers became stronger, and they did not even try to hide it from me anymore. Some of them even suggested openly that my husband should remarry, that he deserved a wife who could give him children. And when I heard those things, it felt as if the little pieces of strength I had left inside me were breaking apart. I kept telling myself to stay calm, to stay respectful, because I did not want to cause conflict between my husband and his family, so I smiled in front of people. I pretended that I was fine. I laughed when they laughed. I sat with them as if nothing was wrong, but deep inside my heart I was completely shattered. Every smile I gave was heavy, because behind it was a storm of sadness and guilt, and every time I looked at my husband, I wondered if he secretly wished the same thing they wished, if deep in his heart he wanted another wife who could give him what I could not. I carried that thought with me day and night, and it made the silence in my life even louder, because not only was I living with the pain of childlessness, but now I was living with the pain of being judged, of being labeled, of being seen as less than a woman because I could not give them a child. Their cruelty cut me in places that were already wounded, and it left me feeling isolated and alone, even when I was surrounded by people. I started to lose confidence in myself, questioning my worth, questioning my purpose, questioning if I even deserved the love my husband gave me. Sometimes at night, when no one was around, I cried quietly into my pillow, not because I was weak, but because the weight of their words was too much to carry in silence. I thought about leaving sometimes, just walking away from all of it. But then I remembered my husband's love, and the promise we had made to stand by each other. Even so, the cruelty of my in-laws became a shadow over my marriage, a constant reminder that in their eyes I was not enough. Living with that judgment was like living in a cage, where every whisper became a chain, every insult became a lock, and my spirit felt trapped with no way to escape. On the outside, people saw a woman smiling politely, but on the inside they did not see a broken heart. They did not see the nights filled with tears. They did not see the loneliness that comes from being treated as less by those who should have been family. That was the reality I carried with me every single day. A reality where kindness had turned into cruelty, and where my silence became my only defense. Every night I prayed with all the strength in my heart, and every night I cried until my pillow was wet with tears, because I could not understand why life had denied me the one blessing I wanted most. As I knelt down or lay in bed, my words to God were always the same, filled with pain and longing, and I would whisper again and again, "Why me? Why take away the greatest blessing from my life?" I did not ask for wealth, I did not ask for fame, I did not ask for anything other than the chance to hold a child in my arms and call myself a mother. I begged God to hear me, to see my pain, to take away this burden. But no matter how much I prayed, the silence was always my answer. My husband and I tried everything we could think of to change our fate, because we wanted to believe there was still hope, that maybe somewhere there was a solution, but nothing worked. We went to the most expensive treatments we could find, sitting in cold hospital rooms where doctors gave us promises that later turned into disappointments, and each visit left us with both less money and less hope. When medicine failed, we turned to herbal remedies, drinking bitter teas, swallowing strange mixtures, and following the instructions of people who swore that nature could heal us. But still there was no change. And every passing month was another reminder that the dream we held on to was slipping further away. When those did not work, we even turned to spiritual healers, because when a heart is desperate it will search for light anywhere, even in places that others may not believe in. We sat with people who chanted prayers, tied threads around our wrists, or gave us oils and powders that were supposed to bring fertility. And though we followed their guidance faithfully, still there was no miracle. With every failed attempt, with every month that passed without good news, a piece of my hope broke away, and it was as if my soul was losing its strength little by little. At first I tried to stay strong, telling myself that the next attempt might be the one, that maybe tomorrow would bring the blessing we waited for. But as time went on, my faith in the possibility grew weaker. It felt like carrying a heavy glass in my hands and watching it crack a little more every time, knowing that eventually it would shatter completely. I kept asking God why He would test me in this way, why He would give me the desire to be a mother if He never planned to fulfill it, why He would let me dream of rocking a baby to sleep if He already knew that cradle would remain empty. Some nights I fell asleep with swollen eyes and a tired heart, but even in my dreams I saw children that vanished as soon as I reached for them. My husband tried to comfort me, telling me we still had each other, and though his words were true, I could not stop myself from grieving the life we would never have. The treatments drained our pockets, the remedies drained our patience, the healers drained our faith, and in the end what we were left with was silence. The same silence that had haunted us from the beginning. And in that silence I realized how fragile hope can be, how it can keep you alive for a time but also tear you apart when it dies slowly piece by piece. My husband still held my hand, and he never stopped showing me care and kindness, but I could see the sadness in his eyes no matter how hard he tried to hide it, because behind every smile he gave there was a weight that both of us felt but neither of us wanted to speak about. He began to avoid baby showers, making excuses not to go when friends or family invited us, because he could not stand being surrounded by the joy of new parents and the excitement of children that we could not have. And though he never said it directly, I knew those gatherings were painful for him, just as they were for me. He also avoided conversations about children in everyday life. When people spoke about their kids, their schools, their birthdays, or their little achievements, I noticed how he grew quiet, how he looked away or quickly changed the topic, because those simple conversations reminded him of the emptiness we carried in our own home. I could feel him slipping away, not slipping away in love because he still loved me and cared for me deeply, but slipping away in dreams, in the future he once imagined for himself, in the life he had hoped to build as a father. It was not his love that was fading, it was his hope, and watching that happen broke me even more. I blamed myself for all of it, because I felt that if I had been able to give him a child, his eyes would not be filled with sadness, his heart would not be heavy, and his dreams would not be dying little by little. Even though he never accused me, never said a cruel word, and never treated me with anything less than love, I carried the guilt as if I had taken something from him, as if my body had stolen his chance to be a father. When I saw him stay silent while others shared stories about their children, I thought, that should have been him talking proudly about his son or daughter, and the thought pierced me like a knife. When I saw him avoid gatherings with babies, I thought, that should have been him smiling as he held his own child in his arms, and the guilt grew heavier inside me. The distance was not in our relationship, because we still held on to each other, but in the unspoken truth that our shared dream was slipping further and further away, and no matter what we tried, we could not stop it. Sometimes I caught him looking at other fathers with a quiet longing, and even though he never said anything, I knew what was in his heart, because the same longing lived in mine. I wished I could take away his pain, I wished I could give him the family he deserved, but wishing did not change reality, and that helplessness made me blame myself even more. It felt like carrying a burden that only I was responsible for, even though I knew it was not truly my fault. But emotions do not always follow logic. and the guilt stayed with me day and night. I smiled when he smiled, I held his hand when he held mine. But inside I was crying because I could feel his dreams slipping through his fingers, and I believed it was because of me. That belief, that guilt, and that silent sadness built a wall inside my heart, a wall of pain that never seemed to break. One night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and a painful question filled my mind, a question I could not push away no matter how hard I tried. What is a woman without a child? That thought stayed with me like an echo that grew louder in the silence, because everywhere I turned, society had convinced me that I was worthless without the role of a mother. People around me, whether directly or through their comments, made me feel as if being a woman was not enough on its own, as if my entire value was tied only to giving birth, raising children, and continuing the family name, and since I could not do that, I began to feel smaller and smaller in my own eyes. I started to see myself the way others saw me, not as a person with dreams, talents, and love to give, but only as someone who had failed at the one thing society demanded most. That feeling slowly broke me from the inside. In my own home, the place where I should have felt safe, I felt like a shadow, moving from room to room without truly belonging, as if my presence had no weight, no purpose, and no meaning. I watched other women in my family and in my neighborhood carrying their children, laughing with them, guiding them, and I thought about how easily society respected them, praised them, and valued them while I felt invisible, overlooked, and judged because I could not do the same. The emptiness inside me grew stronger each day, like a dark hole that kept pulling me in. And the more I tried to fight it, the more it consumed me. It was not just about wanting a child anymore. It became about my identity, about who I was as a woman and as a person. I asked myself again and again if I was enough, if I had any worth at all, or if my life would always be measured by what I could not give. I felt like my own body had betrayed me, and because of that betrayal, society had already labeled me as broken, cursed, or incomplete. Even in moments when my husband showed me love and stood by my side, I could not escape the whispers of the world outside our door. Whispers that told me I was not truly a woman, that I was less, that I was nothing. Those whispers became voices in my own head, and I started to believe them, letting them shape the way I looked at myself. I stopped smiling as easily, I stopped dreaming about the future, and I started to live like a shadow of the person I once was. My life became a cycle of questions and sadness, and the emptiness spread like a weight over my heart, pressing me down, stealing my joy, and making even the simplest things feel meaningless. The ceiling I stared at that night did not just hold my gaze. It became a mirror reflecting back all of my fears, doubts, and self-hatred. I felt trapped in my own thoughts, trapped in a cage built not only by my pain but also by the judgment of others. That emptiness consumed me more each day, and the hardest part was that no one around me could truly understand it, because they only saw the woman who smiled politely in front of them, not the shadow who cried alone in the dark asking God why she was denied the chance to be complete in the eyes of society. I started to dream about impossible things, thoughts that scared me because they did not belong to the person I used to be. But pain and longing had taken me so far that even impossible ideas began to feel tempting. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night or when I saw other mothers holding their babies, I wondered, what if I took someone else's child? What if I crossed a line that should never be crossed, just for the chance to feel the weight of a baby in my arms, just for the chance to call someone my own, even if it was not real? These thoughts did not come because I was cruel or selfish, but because my heart was drowning in emptiness, and in that emptiness, desperation began to grow louder than reason. I imagined walking past a stroller and wishing I could keep the child. I imagined hearing a baby cry and wishing I could claim it as mine, And every time those thoughts came, my mind pushed back with fear, reminding me that this was wrong, reminding me that it would never make me whole. My heart and my mind argued with each other every single day. One side begging for the dream of motherhood, the other side fighting to hold on to logic and morality. It was a battle inside me that no one could see, a battle that left me exhausted, guilty, and ashamed, because I felt like I was losing myself in the struggle. I was not the same person anymore. I was not the woman who once believed in patience and faith. I was becoming someone who thought of things I would have once rejected without a second thought. I tried to pray harder, to remind myself that these were only thoughts and not actions, but the fact that such ideas even entered my mind showed me how deeply broken I was becoming. It was as if my pain was slowly erasing the boundaries of who I was, and the longer I lived without the blessing I wanted, the more blurred those boundaries became. I hated myself for thinking such things, yet I could not stop them, and that hatred only added to the emptiness already consuming me. I would look at myself in the mirror and wonder if I even knew the person staring back, because her eyes were tired, her heart was heavy, and her soul was drifting into a place of darkness where right and wrong no longer looked clear. Losing myself did not happen in one sudden moment. It happened slowly, through every unanswered prayer, through every cruel word from others, through every reminder of what I could not have. And eventually I realized that the woman who once had simple dreams was now a woman who dreamed of impossible and dangerous things. That realization broke me further, because I knew that this was not the life I had imagined for myself. I never wanted to be the kind of person who even thought of taking what did not belong to her, but grief and longing had twisted my mind until it felt like nothing was impossible anymore, and that thought scared me more than anything. I was still holding on to love, still holding on to some sense of right and wrong, but it was slipping, and I could feel myself changing into someone I did not recognize. I told myself again and again that I had to fight, that I had to remember who I was, but the emptiness inside me was strong, and every day it tried to pull me further away from myself. One day a woman from my neighborhood came close to me and whispered something that stayed in my mind long after she left, something I never imagined I would hear so directly, yet something that spoke to the very weakness of my heart. She told me about illegal surrogates, poor women who were willing to risk everything, even their health and their safety, just to give birth in exchange for money. She spoke softly, almost as if she was sharing a secret that no one else should hear. And I listened with my heart pounding because I knew how dangerous it sounded, how risky it was, and how shameful it could be if anyone found out. I knew it was not the right path. I knew it could bring problems bigger than the pain I already carried. But in that moment, all I could hear inside me was the voice of my desire. The voice that had been crying for years for the chance to be called a mother. I thought about what she said again and again, weighing the danger against the longing that had consumed me for so long. My mind told me to walk away, to ignore it, to remember that such things could bring trouble. But my heart reminded me of the empty cradle, the empty rooms, the empty arms that had been waiting far too long. The thought of finally having a child, of finally hearing a baby's cry in my home, of finally breaking the silence that had haunted me for years, was stronger than every warning in my head. I imagined holding a child that I could call my own, raising them, loving them, giving them the life I had always dreamed of giving, and in those imaginings the risk began to feel smaller and smaller compared to the reward. I knew people would judge me if they found out, I knew society would call it shameful, but I also knew that society had already judged me, already called me names like barren and cursed, already made me feel worthless. If they could not understand my pain, why should I let their opinion stop me from finding a way to heal it? The woman told me stories of other families who had done it, families who had taken the risk and now lived with the joy of a child. And as she spoke, I felt the weight of possibility pressing into me. For the first time in a long time, there was something that looked like hope, even if it came in a form that was dark and forbidden. That night I lay awake thinking about it, my mind reminding me of the dangers while my heart painted pictures of happiness. And in the end my heart was stronger than my fear. I told myself that sometimes life pushes people into corners where choices are not simple, where the line between right and wrong blurs because of desperation, and maybe this was one of those times for me. I knew I could be judged, I knew I could be hurt, I knew it could cost more than I imagined, but I also knew that my longing to be a mother was stronger than all of those fears combined. So when the chance came again, I did not say no. I looked at my reflection, I felt the emptiness in my chest, and with a voice that was shaky but certain, I said yes. We kept it a secret, hidden from everyone, even from the people closest to us, because the world would never understand and because I was too afraid of judgment to speak the truth aloud. My husband never knew what I was doing, and even though he was the person I loved most in this world, I could not bring myself to tell him because I feared his reaction, I feared his disappointment, and I feared that if he knew, he might see me differently or turn away from me. So I carried this secret inside me like a heavy stone, pretending everything was normal while my heart beat faster with both hope and fear. I began visiting the surrogate in a small hidden clinic, a place far from the eyes of people who might ask questions. A place where poor women risked their lives and bodies to give birth for money. Every time I walked through the doors of that clinic, I felt nervous, as if I was stepping into another world, a world of shadows where my desire was stronger than morality, and where my choices were painted in shades of desperation rather than clarity. I sat with the surrogate, looked into her tired eyes, and knew that she was taking a great risk for me. Yet I also knew that she represented the only path I had left to touch the dream that had slipped from my hands again and again. When she told me she was pregnant, I felt joy for the first time in many years. A joy so powerful that it filled my chest like light breaking through darkness. For once I allowed myself to imagine a future that was not empty, to imagine a home that echoed with laughter, to imagine myself finally holding a child in my arms. I smiled in a way I had not smiled in so long, because the emptiness inside me seemed, at least for a moment, to soften and make space for hope. But along with that joy, guilt lived inside me, creeping into my heart like a shadow that refused to leave. I asked myself again and again, was I cheating destiny? Was I forcing something that was never meant for me? Was I stealing what life had already decided to withhold from me? These questions haunted me even as I tried to enjoy the small happiness that news brought. When I prayed, I wondered if God was angry with me, if my choice was a sin, if my desperate actions had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. When I looked at my husband, I felt a sting of betrayal in my chest, because I knew I was keeping from him the truth of what I was doing, and even though I told myself it was for his happiness, I could not shake the guilt of lying to the person who trusted me the most. The secret lived inside me like a double-edged sword. One side shining with joy, the other cutting me with guilt. I wanted to celebrate, but I also wanted to cry. I wanted to believe this was a miracle, but I also feared it was a mistake. In the quiet of the night as I lay awake, I kept wondering if destiny could truly be cheated, or if every step I took down this hidden path would someday come back to destroy me. The surrogate began to struggle, and every time I saw her my heart grew heavier, because she was weak, poor, and constantly sick, and I knew that what she was doing was not easy for her. Yet she was carrying the one thing I had longed for my entire life. She lived in a small broken house, surviving each day with little food, little comfort, and little care for herself. Yet inside her grew the child I had already claimed in my heart as my own. I watched her sit with tired eyes and trembling hands, and I realized that poverty had forced her into this choice, that she had risked her health because she needed money to survive. And even though I paid her, it never felt like enough, because how could money ever match the price of carrying life while suffering so deeply? The doctors warned us again and again of possible complications, speaking about risks that could harm both her and the baby, and each time I heard those words my chest tightened with fear. They spoke of her weakness, of her body not being strong enough to carry a child safely, and though I listened carefully, I also tried to block out the worst possibilities, because I could not imagine losing this chance after so many years of pain. I began to pray harder than I ever had before, not just for the child but also for the woman who carried that child, because I knew her suffering was the bridge to my happiness, and I could not bear the thought that she might be destroyed in the process. My prayers became long conversations with God, filled with desperate promises and silent tears. I begged Him to protect her body, to give her the strength to carry safely, to watch over the little life growing inside her, and to allow both of them to survive. Sometimes I wondered if I was selfish, because even as I prayed for her, my heart leaned more heavily toward the baby, the child I already imagined as mine, the child I had already loved long before birth. In my heart I had built a bond with this little soul, speaking to it in my prayers, imagining its tiny hands, its soft cry, its innocent face, and because of that bond, I feared losing it more than I feared anything else. Still, I could not ignore the surrogate's pain. I saw her struggle to walk. I saw her sickness leave her pale and trembling. I saw her eyes dim with exhaustion, and I knew she was risking her life for money, while I was risking my soul for motherhood. Our lives had collided in a way neither of us had expected, tied together by desperation on both sides, and I knew that without her sacrifice, my dream would never come close to being real. Each day became a test of faith, as I balanced between hope and fear, between joy and guilt, between my love for the child and my worry for the woman. And though I tried to stay strong, inside me there was always a voice whispering, "What if something goes wrong? What if the baby is lost? What if she does not survive? What if destiny punishes me for choosing this path?" That fear followed me everywhere, even into my sleep, but still I prayed because praying was the only way I could keep my hope alive. After 9 long months of waiting, months that were filled with fear, worry, and prayers that never seemed to end, the day finally came. The day I had both dreamed of and dreaded. I remember sitting in the clinic with my hands shaking, my heart racing so fast that I could hear the pounding in my ears, afraid of what was about to happen, afraid of what I might lose, yet holding on to the hope that this day would bring me the miracle I had begged God for so many nights. The hours passed slowly, every minute feeling like an entire lifetime, until at last I heard it. A sound that changed my whole world in a single moment. A baby's cry filled the room, loud and sharp, the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my life. A sound that carried both the end of my pain and the beginning of my joy. Tears rushed down my face before I even realized I was crying, because that tiny voice was proof that life had won, that hope had survived, that my dream had somehow found a way to become real. For the first time I held life in my arms. My hands trembled as I reached out, afraid to touch him, afraid that he might slip away if I was not careful. But when the baby was placed in my arms, I felt a warmth spread through my body that no words could ever fully describe. He was small, fragile, and innocent. Yet in that fragile body was all the love and happiness I had ever wanted. He was not born from my body, and I knew the world might never let me forget that, but in that moment it did not matter at all because I felt with every beat of my heart that he was born from my soul. The connection was instant, deep, and unshakable, as if this little child had been waiting for me just as I had been waiting for him. I whispered softly, afraid to disturb him, but needing to say the words out loud, words that carried the truth of my entire existence. "You are mine." My voice broke as I said it, because those three simple words held within them all the years of longing, all the tears, all the prayers, all the sleepless nights, all the struggles, and all the desperate choices I had made just to reach this moment. As I looked into his tiny face, I realized that love does not come only from blood, that motherhood is not written only in the body, but also in the soul, in the sacrifices we make, in the endless desire to protect, in the boundless love that flows naturally the instant we hold a child close. At that moment, the pain of the past did not vanish, but it became smaller, because the joy of the present was so much stronger. All the names I had been called, barren, cursed, unlucky, faded into silence because here I was, holding the proof that I was not empty, that my heart had been right to keep believing even when everything seemed hopeless. I pressed my cheek against his tiny head, breathing in the soft scent of new life, and promised him silently that I would love him, care for him, protect him, and never let him feel unwanted. To the world, he might be a child born through another woman, but to me, he was my son, my soul's child, the answer to the prayer I thought would never be answered. When the baby came into my life, I looked at my husband with trembling lips and told him that a miracle had happened, that somehow after all the years of pain and hopelessness, God had blessed us with the gift we had been waiting for, and he believed me without asking questions, his eyes filling with tears of happiness that I had not seen in so long. He held the baby close, kissed his tiny forehead, and thanked God for answering prayers that he thought had been ignored forever. For the first time in years I saw the heavy sadness lift from his face, replaced with light, joy, and hope, and I wanted to freeze that moment because it was everything I had once feared I would never experience. Soon the news spread through the family, and my in-laws, who once spoke cruel words, who once looked at me with suspicion and disappointment, now celebrated as if a great blessing had been given to the whole household. The same house that had echoed with taunts, with whispers that I was barren and cursed, now rang with laughter, songs, and congratulations, and for a little while, it felt like the wounds of the past were being washed away. I saw my mother-in-law smile at me with pride. I heard my father-in-law tell neighbors that God had been merciful to us, and I watched relatives who had once turned their backs now come with gifts and joy, eager to share in what they called our miracle. The rooms of my house, which once felt heavy with silence and sadness, now felt alive with the sounds of cooing, of footsteps, of happy voices that brought warmth where there used to be coldness. On the outside, everything was perfect, everything looked like the dream I had wanted all my life, but on the inside I was terrified, more terrified than I had ever been, because I was carrying a truth so dangerous it could destroy everything in a single moment. While everyone else celebrated, I felt a shadow in my heart that would not leave, the fear that one day someone would find out, that one day the truth of the surrogate would rise like a storm and break the fragile happiness I had built. At night, when everyone was asleep, I would hold the baby close and kiss his soft cheeks, but I also cried quietly because I knew I was living inside a lie, and lies, no matter how carefully kept, always carry the risk of breaking open. I asked myself again and again, was I strong enough to carry this secret for the rest of my life, to hide it from the man I loved, from the family that now treated me with respect, from the society that would never forgive me if they knew the truth? I wanted to believe that the past did not matter anymore, that all that mattered was the child in my arms, but fear was like a constant whisper in my ear, reminding me that happiness built on secrets is fragile, reminding me that one slip, one word, one accident could take away everything. I smiled during the day, I laughed when others laughed, but at night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, praying that God would protect this secret, praying that no one would ever doubt the miracle they believed in. Because if the truth came out, I knew I would be called a liar, a sinner, a woman who cheated her husband and fooled her family. And so I carried both joy and fear inside me, two heavy emotions that lived side by side in my chest, while I told myself again and again that no matter how afraid I was, no matter how heavy the secret became, I would endure it all, because the baby in my arms was worth every risk. As the days passed, my love for my son grew stronger than anything I had ever known in this world. A love so deep that it touched every part of me and gave me the strength to keep moving forward, even when my fears tried to hold me back. Each morning when I woke up and saw his tiny face resting peacefully beside me, it felt like the sun had risen inside my heart, chasing away the years of darkness that had once controlled my life. His tiny hands, soft and delicate, would curl around my finger as if holding on to me with complete trust, and in that simple touch I felt a bond that words could never fully describe. His innocent smile was like medicine for my soul, healing wounds that I thought would never close, reminding me that even after endless pain, life could still surprise me with beauty. Every giggle, every cry, every movement made me feel alive in ways I had never experienced before, as if motherhood had given me a second birth, a chance to become someone new. When he looked at me with wide, curious eyes, I felt as though he could see into my heart, and know that he was not just my child but also my reason to breathe, my reason to hope, my reason to keep walking even when the world around me seemed heavy. I thought the pain was finally over, that all the years of emptiness and sorrow had been erased by this little miracle, that the curse of silence and loneliness had been broken forever. I told myself again and again that the past no longer mattered, that all the nights of crying, all the cruel words of people, all the whispers that had once shattered me were nothing compared to the joy I now held in my arms. I built dreams for him in my mind, dreams of his first steps, his first words, his first day at school. And as I imagined those moments, my heart swelled with happiness so pure that I forgot for a while about the fear of secrets and the shadow of truth. It felt like destiny had finally shown me mercy, like God had finally listened to my countless prayers, like life had finally opened its hands to bless me after so many years of denial. I lived each day with gratitude, telling myself that I was the luckiest woman alive because I had been given the chance to love, and to be loved by this child who filled every corner of my home with light. And yet, deep inside, I also felt that life is never simple, that happiness never comes without tests, and though I wanted to ignore the thought, I knew destiny was not finished with me. There was always a voice in the back of my mind whispering that joy built on fragile ground can be shaken at any moment, that no matter how tightly I held my son, the truth and the future were forces beyond my control. I wanted to believe my story had reached its happy ending, but a part of me feared that destiny had more to write, that my journey was not yet complete, and that the battles of the heart were not over. One quiet evening, when I thought life had finally settled into peace and my days were filled only with the sound of my son's laughter, there came a knock on the door that changed everything. I opened it, expecting a neighbor, a relative, or perhaps just someone passing by, but instead, standing there before me was the surrogate woman, the one whose body had carried the child I now called my own. The moment I saw her, my heart sank into my stomach, because her face was pale like paper, her cheeks sunken, and her eyes hollow as if they had been emptied of all light and joy. She looked like a shadow of the woman I had once known at the hidden clinic, and in that instant fear shot through me like a cold wave. She did not step in at first. She only stood there in the doorway, trembling as though she carried a weight too heavy to bear, and I stood frozen, clutching the door, afraid of what her presence meant. Then she whispered words so soft and broken that they felt like knives piercing through my chest. "He is mine too." Those 4 words shattered the fragile world I had built around myself. My heart froze, my body stiffened, and it felt as if the air had been stolen from my lungs. I had lived every day with the fear that one day she might come, that one day the truth I had hidden so carefully would walk right back into my life, and now the nightmare I feared most had arrived. I wanted to close the door, to shut her out, to pretend she was only a ghost of my imagination. But she was real, standing there with eyes that seemed to demand something I could not give. In that moment, every smile, every laugh, every dream I had built with my son felt threatened, as if a hand had reached into my heart and was trying to pull him away. My mind raced with questions. What did she want? Why had she come now? Was she here for money, for recognition, or for the child himself? I wanted to scream, to beg her to leave, to remind her that the arrangement was over, that she had agreed to let go. But my voice refused to come out, trapped in my throat by fear and guilt. I looked at her face and saw pain, maybe regret, maybe longing, and though I wanted to hate her for appearing at my door, a part of me also pitied her, because I knew she had given her body, her health, and perhaps even her soul in exchange for survival, and maybe the bond between her and the baby was something that no agreement, no money could fully erase. Still, I could not let myself think that way, because to me he was not just a baby born from her womb. He was my son, my reason to live, the child I had prayed for all my life, the child I had already given my soul to. Fear and anger fought inside me as I stood in that doorway, my hands trembling, my heart pounding, and the sound of my son's soft laughter echoing in the background like a reminder of what I stood to lose. I realized that this was the beginning of a storm I had always known might come, the moment when secrets demand to be faced, when choices made in desperation return to test the strength of one's heart. She looked at me with those hollow eyes, and after a long heavy silence that felt like it was squeezing the air out of the room, she finally spoke words that made my whole body tremble. She demanded money. More money than I could ever give, more than I could even dream of finding, as if she knew exactly how desperate I was and how tightly fear had its grip on me. Her voice was low, almost shaking, but her words carried a sharpness that cut through me like a blade. Then came the threat I had always dreaded, the words I had prayed I would never hear. "Or I will tell the world your secret." At that moment, fear consumed me in a way I had never experienced before. It was not the same fear I felt when the doctors told me I could never be a mother, and not the same fear I felt during the 9 long months of waiting while the surrogate carried my child. This was a deeper, darker fear, the fear of losing everything I had built, everything I had dreamed of, everything I had fought and suffered for. In my mind, I saw images of what would happen if the truth came out. I saw my husband's face, filled with betrayal and hurt, as he realized that the miracle he had believed in was nothing but a lie. I imagined my in-laws, who once celebrated and showered me with pride, turning against me again, calling me cursed and shameless, throwing words sharper than knives at me until I could no longer stand. I imagined neighbors whispering, society pointing fingers, people spitting cruel words that would stain my name forever. But worst of all, I saw my son being taken from me, the little boy who had given me life again, the child who was not born from my body but had been born from my soul. The thought of losing him was unbearable. It felt like someone was reaching into my chest and trying to rip my heart out. My knees felt weak, my hands shook, and I struggled to find words because what could I possibly say to her? I did not have the money she wanted, and even if I had, I knew that giving it would not guarantee her silence forever. Fear whispered that even if I paid her today, tomorrow she might come back asking for more, and the day after that she might come again, holding my secret over my head like a weapon. The walls around me seemed to close in. My home no longer felt safe, and I realized I was trapped in a nightmare where every choice was filled with danger. I thought of begging her for mercy, thought of reminding her that she had agreed to this from the beginning, that she had taken money already, that she had promised to walk away. But I also saw in her eyes that mercy was gone, replaced by her own desperation. She too was trapped by poverty, by hunger, by a life that had given her nothing. And now she was using the only power she had left, my secret. Inside, my mind screamed, telling me that if this truth came out, my life would be ruined beyond repair, that no one would ever forgive me, that I would lose my husband, my family, my respect, and most of all, my child. And so as I stood there, staring at her pale face and listening to her threat, I felt as though the ground beneath me was breaking apart, leaving me hanging between the love I could not lose and the fear that now owned me completely. For weeks I lived in terror, unable to sleep peacefully, unable to breathe freely, because every moment of my life was filled with the fear that my secret would be exposed. I woke up each morning with a heavy chest, knowing that at any time there could be another knock on the door, another demand, another threat from the woman who carried the power to destroy everything I loved. To keep her away, I did what I thought I had to do. I began hiding money in small amounts, tucking it into places where no one in the house would find it, always watching over my shoulder as if I were a criminal. I sold my jewelry, the pieces that had been given to me during my wedding, the ones that carried memories of a happier time. And though my heart ached with each item I let go, I told myself it was a small price to pay for keeping my son safe in my arms. I lied to my husband, telling him stories to cover the missing money, making excuses when he asked why I seemed distracted or why I no longer wore the gold bangles he had once placed on my wrists with so much love. Each lie cut me deeper, but fear pushed me to keep going. Because telling him the truth was impossible. If he knew, everything would fall apart, and I could not let that happen. But no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. The woman kept coming back, her face harder each time, her voice colder, her eyes showing no sign of mercy. She would take what I offered, but soon after she would return, asking for more, demanding more, as if my life had become her endless source of survival. Each time I saw her standing at my door, my stomach turned with dread, and I realized that I was trapped in a cycle I could not escape. I thought that if I gave her enough, she would finally disappear, that maybe she only needed a little help to move on, but I was wrong. Her hunger was not just for money. It was a hunger that grew larger every time it was fed. A hunger that would never end. No matter how much I sacrificed, no matter how much I sold, no matter how much I lied, she always wanted more. And I began to understand that nothing I did would ever satisfy her. Her shadow loomed over my life like a curse, and I lived each day knowing that I could never truly be free as long as she held my secret in her hands. One night, when the world outside was silent and my house was covered in darkness, I woke suddenly with a strange feeling, as if something was not right. My heart began to beat fast for no reason I could understand, and when I turned my head toward the window, I froze in fear. Standing there in the shadows outside the glass was the woman. the surrogate whose presence had already haunted my life for so long. The moonlight fell faintly across her pale face, and her hollow eyes stared at me in a way that made my blood run cold. For a moment I could not move, could not breathe, because it felt like I was staring at a ghost who had returned to remind me of the truth I was trying so hard to bury. Then, in a low, chilling voice, she spoke words that pierced me deeper than any knife ever could. She said, "One day I will take him back." Those 7 words burned into my soul like fire, and I knew that I would never forget them, no matter how many years passed. My body shook as though the ground itself had crumbled beneath me, because her threat was not just about money this time. It was about the child, my child, the one person I could not imagine living without. In that moment, every fear I had ever pushed aside came rushing back stronger than ever, and I felt powerless, trapped, and broken. I ran to where my son was sleeping, his small chest rising and falling peacefully, completely unaware of the storm swirling around him. I picked him up and held him tightly in my arms, pressing his little body against mine as if by holding him close I could protect him from every danger in the world. My tears began to flow uncontrollably, soaking his blanket as I rocked him back and forth, whispering promises he was too young to understand. I told him that no one would ever take him from me, that I would fight the whole world if I had to, that I would give my life before I allowed anyone to separate us. All night long I stayed awake, clutching him to my chest, crying silently into the darkness, too afraid to close my eyes, too afraid that if I let go for even a second, she might come and try to steal him away. My heart was heavy with fear, but also heavy with love. A love so fierce that it hurt. A love that felt like both a blessing and a punishment. Those words, "One day I will take him back," kept repeating in my mind over and over again, echoing like a curse, and I realized that they would never leave me. They would follow me into every moment of motherhood. They would haunt me in every smile, every laugh, every peaceful night, reminding me that my joy was fragile, that my secret was dangerous, that my miracle was at risk. That night I understood something painfully clear. The battle for my child had only just begun, and it was not a battle fought with weapons or strength, but with fear, desperation, and an endless will to hold on to what destiny had finally placed in my arms. I reached a point where the weight of my secret became too heavy for my heart to carry, and I realized that if I kept hiding the truth, it would slowly destroy me from the inside. Every lie I told had built another wall between me and my husband, and every day that passed I felt more like a stranger in my own home. I could no longer look into his eyes without feeling the sting of guilt, and I could no longer smile without feeling the pain of my deception. So one night, with tears running down my face and my hands trembling, I finally gathered the courage to tell him everything. I told him about the endless treatments we had tried, the doctor's harsh words, the hopelessness that consumed me, and the emptiness I felt as I longed for a child that my body could never give me. I told him about the dark nights when I cried into my pillow, begging God for mercy, and about the shame I carried because of society's cruel words. I confessed how I had secretly turned to a surrogate, a poor woman willing to risk everything, and how I had kept it hidden from him out of fear that he would not understand. I admitted every lie I had spoken, every coin I had spent, every piece of jewelry I had sold, and every excuse I had made to keep the truth buried. My voice shook with every word, and deep inside I prepared myself for anger, rejection, and hatred. I thought he would never forgive me. I thought he would walk away, leaving me with nothing but the son I had clung to with all my soul. But when I finally looked up at him, expecting to see rage in his eyes, I was met instead with something I did not expect: understanding. He reached out, took my trembling hands in his, and held them tightly as though to assure me that I was not alone. Then, in a voice filled with calm and love, he said the words that broke me all over again, but this time not from pain but from relief. "You did it because you loved us." In that moment my tears flowed harder, because instead of hate, he offered compassion. Instead of anger, he offered comfort. Instead of rejection, he offered love. I realized that even though I had carried this burden in silence for so long, I had never truly been alone. He had always been by my side, even when I thought I was losing him. His words wrapped around me like a blanket, soothing the storm inside me, and for the first time in years I felt a sense of peace. My heart still carried guilt for the choices I had made, but his forgiveness gave me strength, and his acceptance gave me hope that maybe together we could face whatever came next. After years of living in fear, hiding secrets, and carrying the weight of guilt on my shoulders, I finally realized that I could not fight this battle alone, and I no longer had to. With my husband by my side, I found strength I never thought I had. Together we decided that enough was enough, that we could not let the fear of the Saget's threats control our lives or endanger the future of the child we both loved more than anything in the world. Hand in hand, we made the choice to stand up and fight openly instead of trembling in silence. The first step was going to the authorities, something I had avoided for so long, because I was terrified that exposing the truth would mean losing everything. But this time I felt courage because my husband was there, his hand firmly holding mine, his eyes reminding me that I was not alone anymore. Walking into that office felt like stepping into a battlefield, my heart racing, my palms sweating, but I knew it had to be done. We spoke to lawyers and officials, explaining our situation, confessing the secret I had carried in shame, and pleading for protection. It was not an easy path, because the surrogate did not give up quietly. She resisted at every step, her voice filled with demands, her eyes flashing with anger, her threats growing louder as she tried to hold on to the power she believed she still had over us. There were moments when I felt my courage slipping, moments when her presence reminded me of the dark nights I had spent crying in fear. But every time I looked at my husband, I remembered why we were doing this. Not for ourselves, but for our son, whose innocent life deserved peace and security. Signing the legal documents was one of the hardest and most emotional things I have ever done. My hands shook as I placed my name on the papers, because each signature felt like both a confession of my past choices and a promise to protect my child no matter the cost. My husband's calm strength gave me the courage to finish, and together, we secured the custody of our son in the eyes of the law. The process was long, filled with questions, arguments, and painful reminders of how desperate I had once been. But in the end, the law was on our side. For the first time, I felt like we had a shield protecting us, something stronger than fear, something official and unshakable. Though the surrogate fought back and resisted with everything she could, her power over me was finally broken, because the truth had been faced and the law had spoken. When the final decision came, declaring that the child was legally ours, tears rolled down my face. Not the tears of guilt or fear I had shed so many times before, but tears of relief, of gratitude, of freedom. That day I realized that love had given me the strength to confess, courage had led me to fight, and faith had carried me through the darkest nights. Holding my son in my arms after everything we had endured, I finally felt safe, finally felt that he truly and completely belonged with us, not just in my heart, but in the eyes of the world. When the truth finally came out, and my husband's family learned everything, The treatments, the surrogate, the secrecy, and the lies. Their reaction was exactly what I had feared for so many years. Faces that once smiled at me now looked shocked, confused, and even cold. Whispers spread quickly, and I could almost hear their unspoken thoughts. Words like shame, betrayal, and dishonor hanging in the air around me. Some members of the family judged me harshly, saying things that pierced my heart like knives. They asked how I could deceive them for so long, how I could bring a child into the family through such a hidden way, and why I had not trusted them enough to tell the truth from the beginning. Others did not say anything directly, but their silence spoke louder than words. They turned their faces away from me, refusing to meet my eyes, as though I had become someone unworthy of their respect, as though my decision had stained the honor of the entire household. For a long time I had dreaded this moment, imagining that their rejection would crush me, that their judgment would break me apart completely. But when it actually happened, I found myself surprisingly calm, because I realized that their opinions no longer had the power to define me. Yes, their harsh looks and cruel whispers hurt, but not enough to take away the one thing that truly mattered. As I sat there with my son in my arms, his tiny fingers curled tightly around mine, his innocent eyes looking up at me as if I were his whole world, I understood that nothing else in life could ever weigh more than this love. I no longer cared about their judgment, their gossip, or their rejection. I had spent too many years living under the crushing weight of what society thought of me, allowing others to decide whether I was worthy or not. Now I knew better. I had my child, my miracle, my blessing, my reason to live, and that was enough to silence every cruel voice around me. Holding him close, I felt a strength rise inside me, a quiet but unshakable belief that no matter what anyone said, no matter who turned their back on me, I had won the only battle that truly mattered. I had fought through pain, lies, fear, and shame, and I had come out of it with my son safe in my arms. Nothing anyone else thought could take that away from me. In that moment, I understood that love was bigger than judgment, stronger than shame, and more powerful than the weight of family expectations. I was no longer the broken woman who cried at night asking, "Why me?" I was a mother, and that was all I ever wanted to be. Years later, when the storms of my past had calmed and the fears that once haunted me became only memories, I often found myself sitting quietly in the garden, watching my child run freely under the open sky. The sound of his laughter, so pure and full of life, would fill the air like music, and in those moments I would feel tears gathering in my eyes. Not tears of sadness but of gratitude. I would think back to the years when I believed I was cursed, when every doctor's word felt like a death sentence, when the emptiness of my arms was the heaviest burden I carried. I remembered the silence in my home, the whispers of society that called me barren, and the endless nights I cried myself to sleep, convinced that motherhood was a gift I would never be allowed to hold. But as I watched my son, his small feet racing across the grass, his voice echoing with joy, I realized something powerful. Motherhood is not only about giving birth. It is not limited to the pain of labor, or the blood that connects a child to a mother's body. True motherhood goes deeper. It lives in the heart, in the endless love that grows stronger every day, in the sleepless nights spent watching over a fever, in the sacrifices made quietly and without regret, and in the courage to fight for your child no matter what stands in the way. My journey had been different, marked by secrets, struggles, and pain, but it had led me to this moment, to this love that no one could take away from me. I had once believed that being unable to conceive made me less of a woman, that without a child born from my womb I was incomplete, but now I knew how wrong I had been. Motherhood had shaped me not through biology but through love, resilience, and devotion. I had loved fiercely, sacrificed everything I could, and fought with all my strength to protect the little life entrusted to me. That is what made me a mother. I was once a barren woman, mocked by society and judged by family, but as I looked at my son, my miracle, my pride, my joy, I no longer carried that word like a wound. I was not barren anymore. I was full, complete, and blessed because I was a mother, not by chance, not by tradition, but by choice, by faith, and by love.